What's up, everybody? This is the 2013 Hyundai Genesis Coupe 3.8. Huge thanks to Harrison Auto Sales for providing me here with this very clean Genesis Coupe to review for you guys today. So about the 2013 Genesis Coupe, well, this was the first year of the refresh for the Genesis Coupe, and it's been almost 10 years since I last drove a couple of these Genesis Coupes, but they were with the automatic. This is the first time I'm getting a chance to try out the manual transmission here many years later. And as far as the Genesis Coupes go, you know, it's really a shame that they don't exist anymore, but it was a really cool combo. It was trying to fight the V6 powered muscle cars of the day and to be a punchier alternative to the Scion FRS and Subaru BRZ. And so as far as the styling here for 2013, it did get a refresh here, so it has a more aggressive hood, and you had a redone front end there with new headlights and bumper and all that. They're trying to, I think, mimic the GTR a little bit up front there with the grille and all that. But I think it's a really cool look, and I think, you know, 10 years later here, it's aged really well, and it looks pretty good. You also have some nice 19-inch wheels here coming down to the sides, and this one is a track trim, and so that means you get these Brembo brakes here, along with a few other upgrades, which I'll talk more about once we hit the road. Coming down to the sides, I always like the side silhouette here. It's kind of an interesting little kink there right by the door pillar, and it sweeps up towards the rear there. And then the out back, I think it also still looks really nice. Nice spoiler here on these sportier versions, and nice large taillights that I think still look pretty good these days. And so overall, I think it's a really nice look that has aged very well and looks pretty classy too, especially here in black. Right, for the interior of the Genesis Coupe, well, it's a pretty nice place to be here, even about 11 years later. So first thing, sitting down in the seats, you have some nice sports seats here that actually have pretty decent bolstering, a little on the wide side, but I mean, for something like this, I think it's, you know, really nice and sporty. Now, since these seats have aged, they are a little bit firm with the leather, and so it means it's a little slippery and not super soft, but, you know, still nice seats nonetheless. There are power adjustments here on the driver's side as well. The steering wheel, even though it isn't anything special to look at, is a nicely shaped wheel. Has a great 9-3 grip, nice little 10-2 notches, and if you go for an automatic, you will get paddle shifters on the back of the wheel as well. The gauges are also nice. I really like the blue glow that they have and the little gauges within the gauges there, and the basic little trip info in the middle, but gets all the basics done just fine. You do also have these auxiliary gauges here right above your shifter, and so you have a kind of useless fuel economy gauge as well as actual useful gauges for oil temp, and also one for torque, which is a fun little thing. Now, if you were in a turbo Genesis Coupe, that torque gauge would be replaced by a boost gauge, which is also nice. But even way back when, I remember complaining that these gauges were a little too low to be useful while driving, at least at spirited speeds. Right up top here, in these higher trims, you had a 7-inch touchscreen. I believe you could still go to a regular non-touchscreen kind of little basic layout. Now, this was before the days of any kind of smartphone integration, but it does have an auxiliary jack and a USB jack, so you can input stuff through there. You also have a CD drive, and you also do have satellite radio in addition to regular AM FM. So a good amount of media sources there, so that it kind of does help to future-proof this vehicle a little bit, so that it's able to, you know, still do playback of modern devices and all that. And since that is a pretty easy square cutout there, I'm assuming you could probably also swap that out for something aftermarket if you really wanted to. But that screen is tied into the climate controls, so I mean, it will show you your climate control information, and it also does have the navigation and stuff, even though it's, you know, pretty dated and, you know, probably not the best nav, but it does have navigation as well. And so, you know, I think it's just a nice setup still that, you know, I think has aged a little bit better than at least the ones that had no screen at all. But anyway, you know, just nice volume and tune knobs, and you know, just a few other buttons here, but a nice and simplified stack. I think it actually looks pretty nice here. Otherwise, you just have two cup holders. You have a center armrest with more of that harder leather, but a good amount of space in there, including a power outlet. And then you have a little map pocket here in the doors. You also see this one has the Infinity stereo upgrade, which was another thing. I think it gave you like a 400 watt or so stereo, and a nice improvement. Again, it's not going to be anything amazing, but, you know, nice nonetheless. So overall, you know, a pretty nice interior. And you know, as far as backseat goes, you know, it's going to be the same as like all the muscle cars that were a similar size, you know, where you had a decent amount of space. It's not as much backseat space as like a Challenger, but, you know, pretty comparable to the Mustang and the Camaro, where it's going to come down to, of course, how big the driver is. But it's a nice backseat to use in a pinch, and a decent size, but, you know, nothing enormous or anything. And then trunk space is also actually a little better than you might expect. It's not super deep. Some of the other, you know, muscle cars had a deeper trunk, but with this, you know, it does go decently far back there, and you do have a spare tire beneath the floor as well. So nice inclusions there. But you know, overall, I think it's gonna be a really nice practical coupe. Obviously, people have lived with these for over a decade now. They're, you know, really nice to live with. You know, visibility is nice and easy, and so overall, just, yeah, a very nice place to be. But let's start up and go for a drive. The Genesis Coupes here actually did have keyless access and push button starts. You just have a little fob here, some nice metal buttons on the back and on the bottom. It's actually a pretty high quality feeling key for something from, again, 11 years ago here. And so of course it's just, leave the key in your pocket, you hit the engine start button, put the clutch in, and it starts right up. All right, so setting off here in the Genesis Coupe. So the first thing you notice, well, this one definitely has a couple little modifications. I think there's a resonator delete because this exhaust sounds a little louder than I remember these V6s sounding, even with the exhaust on the one that I remember reviewing from way back when. It also has a K&N Typhoon intake, so you'll hear some extra induction noises there from that. But anyway, other things here, just setting off. So it's actually pretty good for the manual. So the manual, they refined it a lot for 2013 to give it better feel, better gating, a more natural feel for the clutch engagement, and a few other things here because they heard complaints that people didn't love the manual in the pre-refresh Genesis Coupe, so they tried to improve it here. Now I don't have any experience with the previous pre-refresh to compare, but what I can say is that this feels pretty good. It's a little bit of a longer throw, just mostly I think it comes down to this kind of long shift knob there, but aside from that, I mean, it seems like it's a pretty nice manual to drive. Now this one's got over 97,000 miles on it, so might be a little worn in, might be a little bit easier to be smooth with it, but I've had no problem rev matching my downshift so far, and everything about it just seems pretty nice. The clutch isn't too heavy or anything. Also, like I mentioned earlier, your visibility is really great here. You have A-pillars that are a little thick but not too bad. You kind of have a dashboard that sits down nice and low. The hood drops down nicely, so even though you're sitting low in this car, you can still see out very, very well. View out of the back is also pretty good, in typical coupe standards, nothing amazing, but a nice big rear window there. And so, just a very easy car to live with as far as all that goes. Now, one thing I will say about, again, this vehicle being about 11 years old or so, there are some creaks and rattles, and, you can see there's a little bit of wear here on some of the trim and stuff where it's starting to peel off. So it's a little creaky. It's an 11-year-old Hyundai. They made a lot of improvements back then. They were really pushing hard to improve their quality and all that. And I think this still feels like a very solid car. Just, it's not going to be totally quiet, but most stuff that's 11 years old isn't. But just one other little thing I wanted to mention there. But, steering weight is actually nice and weighty, and not a ton of feel, but not too bad. And, overall, no complaints there at low speeds. And also at some low speeds here, the ride isn't too bad either. So this one being the track edition, you do have some sportier damper settings. The dampers themselves are just a little stiffer springs, thicker anti-roll bars. The track packs also does give you a Torsen limited slip differential in the rear there, and Brembo brakes that are 13.4-inch rotors in the front, 4-piston calipers, and 4-piston calipers in the rear as well, with some 13-inch rotors out back as well. So pretty stout setup here, and they were really trying to go for track legitimacy. The media drive for this vehicle when it came out, they actually had people do track time in these, and it sounded like they weren't amazing on track, but were very lively with the back end especially. We'll see if we sense any of that out here on the roads, but just slower speeds here, just kind of cruising on a little back road here. It's nice. It's just a nice cruiser, and I'm happy that it's not too stiff with this track setup. And yeah, you can feel the bumps a little bit, but not too bad at all. But let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. Here we go. Wow, what a great sound. And man, this thing it pulls pretty well. This shifter, though, it feels like it doesn't love being rushed, and so it was kind of, it was doing it, but wasn't exciting to kind of put it in the next gear there. It felt like it still just, wants you to go a little bit slower there, but didn't grind or anything. Felt really, really solid, but man, this thing is punchy. So it's the 3.8-liter naturally aspirated V6 engine. It did get direct injection here for 2013. That was one of the new things here for it. And so anyway, it does 348 horsepower, 295 pound-feet of torque. It'll do a 5.2 seconds 0 to 60, which is a few tenths of a second slower than the automatics, I believe. But, still nice and punchy. It'll do a 13.9 second quarter mile run, and it'll have a top speed here for the manuals of 149 miles per hour as well. So, pretty good top speed too for something like this. And Man, this motor is really nice and strong, even in the lower RPMs, which is kind of impressive because it doesn't make peak torque until like 5,300 RPMs. Peak horsepower doesn't come on until 6,400 RPMs. So you really have to wring this thing out. I mean, it's showing an indicated red line here, right around, 6,500 or maybe slightly beyond that. But, it's a good amount of punch. And now on a back road. Okay, wow, traction control really limits you big time. It's crazy. So, man, that sounds great with that intake. But, so it's interesting, yeah. So the traction control system in this is really limiting. It was obviously, again, from 11 years ago. But I read online that there were a few different modes for it. But all I see is an off button. And I've looked over this interior. There's no other sign of a mode button for anything as far as drive modes go. So I'm not sure how to do that, but I've heard that whenever you turn it off, I mean, these things can be pretty tail happy, especially this one here has 225 wide tires on the front, 245s in the rear, and they're just off-brand tires here on this one. So probably not the best grip scenario, but the great thing is it's a punchy amount of power with rear-wheel drive. It's an independent rear suspension here, and you have that Torsen limited slip diff once again to really help put that power down well. So other things though, as we're going around these corners here, I mean, really nice and composed. I gotta say that it really feels pretty planted here so far, and going over some potholes there, that felt, totally fine, but it just, okay, so I can feel there is a little bit of understeer, and I read about that a little bit as well. When you push these, there is a little bit of understeer initially, but then you can play around with the back end with the throttle and get oversteer, but it kind of has this switch off point between the two. It's not totally neutral from the start, and I'm sure, again, if you have some grippier tires, that might give you some extra front end grip and some back end grip as well to give this a little bit more handling prowess. But even the way this is, though, I mean, it's still a really fun thing to just have a fun little drive on a back road in. And the fact they're pretty light too, that certainly helps. That was one of the big advantages here of these, was that these weighed under 3,400 pounds. And all the other competitors, when you look at like the muscle car competitors, those were all going to be several hundred pounds heavier. But we're coming up to another tight corner here, and I'm going to just see how the body roll is, see if we can get this back end to come out a little bit. Okay, so yeah, it definitely is a little playful, again, especially I think a lot of it comes down to the tires. But I did find that the traction control button has, if you press and hold it, it'll turn off stability control as well. So I just have traction control off to let the wheels slip a little bit, but I've left the stability control on there so that it won't let me get too bent out of shape, hopefully. And so, going around some more corners here in it, though, I mean, it just all handles really well. I'm pretty impressed. Brakes also have a nice bite here towards, I mean, it's a little bit of a, travel to the brake pedal there, but, nice and confidence-inspiring brakes here, being the Brembos. And 4-piston in the rear is kind of rare, even on performance cars these days, or some of them. So, I mean, pretty stout braking setup here, especially for something, again, that's under 3,400 pounds. And, yeah, I mean, it's all just, feels pretty nice and tight, and I'm pretty impressed, too. I mean, I don't know, the service records on this one, but almost 100,000 miles. The fact this thing still feels nice and tight for the suspension here, I'm pretty impressed with the way this whole thing is really aged well, and drives really well too. Now, the automatic transmissions were the more popular choice, of course, and it was an 8-speed automatic, by the way. For those that are curious, you can go watch my automatic reviews of both the turbo and the V6 if you're curious to hear what the automatic's like. It was an 8-speed auto for 2013, and that was pretty advanced, back then as well too. But the manual shifts weren't very quick, so the manual transmission is definitely the way to go if you want the sportiest setup possible. But I mean, these roads are bumpy, a bunch of undulations and stuff, and it still is just soaking it all up really well, and is just a really nice companion on a back road here. And another acceleration here. Okay, this time I decided to turn off traction control there. And man, it's yeah, it gave me a little bit of a wiggle there on the back end. It's really fun. I like how it dances around and plays with you. I prefer that. I'd rather have that than something that's totally, sanitized and composed. And so, it keeps you on your toes a little bit, but it doesn't feel sketchy or like it's, really trying to bite back too much. At least, with my limited experience here, but really just feels great. So Anyway, the last couple of things I mentioned here are just the pricing as far as how it compares to competitors these days, and then also the fuel economy. So as far as fuel economy goes, they're rated at 18 mpg in the city, 27 on the highway, and 21 combined. And so totally fine for something with this much power and a V6. And then as far as the competition, now this one at Harrison Auto Sales is available to buy, by the way, if you're watching this in the first a couple of weeks or whatever before it's sold. There's a link in the description if you want to check this one out in particular. But this one with 97,000 miles here on it, there's going for $13,000, which I think is a lot of car for the money. And I think these have kind of depreciated a little bit more than some of the others. G37s have also depreciated. There's one of the other primary competitors, although they're a little more luxurious. It's a pretty similar experience to this as far as luxury stuff on the inside and all that. And they definitely have their own cult following, and I've reviewed the G37s. They're also really good, really fun cars for sure. But I think with this, it's kind of a little less appreciated than those. These are a little more rare, and so as a result, I think they're a little more desirable, honestly. But I think whenever it's just trying to find a nice one like this is really hard to do. And yeah, it'll play around. I like the way they set this thing up. I think they did a really good job on it. But I think most of the other competitors have depreciated to around this same price point as well. If you look at a 2013 Mustang V6, Camaro V6, Challenger V6, all those are right around this price as well. And I guess you could say that like the FRS, the BRZ are competitors as well, since they do still have a back seat at least, but a lot less horsepower in those. But they're a little more sports car like and less of the Grand Tourer sports coupe kind of thing like this is. Those have actually kind of started to, I think, hold their values pretty well, and some of those with decent amounts of miles on them are still going for even a little bit more than this. And this is roughly the same or cheaper with way more power, way more performance, and still that same rear-wheel drive fun. Still has a little bit of sub diff and good hardware here, Brembos, which you don't get on a regular FRS or BRZ. And so I think it's a really solid value, and especially compared to the Mustang of its time. that didn't even have an independent rear suspension yet for the 2013. So this is even a little more sophisticated than even that Mustang. And of course the Camaro and the Challenger did have a little more sophistication in their back ends, but Challenger was a lot more bloated and 4,000 pounds even for a regular V6 version. Camaros were also a little bit chunkier, and they have their own appeal. They have their own pros and cons as well. I won't get into all that here, but I just think the Genesis is a very unique choice, and one that will help you to stand out from this sea of Mustangs and Camaros and Challengers and even our FRSs and BRZs. This is, I think, even more rare than those are, especially with a manual transmission. And so overall, I think there's still a lot of appeal here for the Genesis, and even 10, 11 years later, I think these still have a real strong value proposition, a real strong appeal, and are still a really good performance bargain for the enthusiast that doesn't have a ton of money to spend but still wants a great sounding V6, still wants a bunch of power, impressive straight line performance even these days, 5.2 seconds 0 to 60, and being able to get with a manual and everything else. It all is just really, really well done. So anyway, really happy I got to try out the manual Genesis Coupe here finally, and huge thanks to Harrison Auto Sales once again for providing me here with this vehicle to review for you guys today. Let me know your thoughts on the Genesis Coupe in the comments below. Be sure to definitely check out the link in the description again if you're curious about this one in particular. And yeah, please leave a like and subscribe to keep these videos coming, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.